Major funding for this program is provided by the Washington Centennial Commission. Additional funding is provided by the Music and Art Foundation, the Washington Mutual Savings Bank Foundation, the Norcliffe Fund, and by the subscribers of KCTS Seattle.
Without all the women, now where would we be? Working and caring throughout history. Bare hands on the plow, but their stories untold. So here's to the women who shouldered the load.
During Washington's 100 years of statehood, many women have immigrated here. Women moved by necessity, with dreams to begin a new life far from home. Some of them were writers, and their words tell us something of their lives. Teiko Tomita was a young bride when she arrived in Washington from Japan in 1921. She began writing poetry as a schoolgirl and continued to write throughout her long life in America. Her poems chronicle a journey into the heart of an unknown and sometimes unwelcoming land and reflect the experiences of other women who made the same voyage.
Never again. The days when my heart and soul went into my studies in a strange country, growing old.
With her husband Masakazu, Tomita began life on a farm near the town of Wapato in the Yakima Valley.
The house was little better than a shack. In the coldest season, you could hear the eggs in the kitchen cupboard cracking. In the summer, it was scorching hot. And on such nights, we spread a blanket under the peach tree and slept there.
Tomita worked along with her husband in the fields. She wrote her poems on scraps of paper and revised them in the cabin at night.
Another day spent digging potatoes, competing with men, harvest beginning, my back all pain.
Within several years of Tomita's arrival, laws were passed in Washington preventing Japanese from owning or leasing land. The laws were devastating to the Japanese community in the Yakima Valley. The Tomitas and many others lost their farms. Teiko and Masa moved to a remote part of the valley, where he found work in a nursery, she as a cook. It was there, far from family and friends, that her first child was born.
5 miles in any direction, not a sign of a neighbor. How many days have passed? How many more days will come? Today, like any other.
Finally, in 1929, the Tomitas decided to leave the valley.
With my husband, Masakazu Tomita, I moved from Wapato to the suburbs of Seattle, and we began a 14-acre nursery on a land which had never been cultivated before. Using the dynamite, we began clearing the land. We planted saplings as thin as chopsticks, and of course, had no income.
During the next decade, they slowly built up the business. They had 4 children by then, all in school. Then the unimaginable happened.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special news bulletin. The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor.
The loyalty of all Japanese was suddenly suspect. Many Japanese hastily destroyed precious belongings, anything that might be interpreted as un-American. Teiko Tomita burned all of her poems. The Tomitas and 140,000 others of Japanese ancestry were evacuated to internment camps.
Locked deep within the iron stockade, I write poems on the sorrows of war, little consolation.
In one of the ironies of camp life, Tomita suddenly had time to write, something she hadn't had since she was a young woman in Japan.
Again this morning, I read the war news. Clouds cover my heart. My mind lies frozen.
3 years later, the war ended, and the Tomitas returned to Sunnydale.
After all these years, we may send mail to the homeland, but all I can write is, we are alive.
Teika went to work as a seamstress, a job she kept well into her 70s. With her help, Maza re-established the nursery. She eventually published her poetry in Japan and the U.S. In 1985, her poems appeared in Breaking the Silence, a play about the Japanese internment in which her grandson, a New York actor, performed. Now 92, Tomita resides in Seattle with her daughter.
Holding my hands, my parents told me, live happily. Even now, their touch in my old hands.
For a close-up look at the world around you, keep your eyes on us. Why do dogs have such a keen sense of smell? And what element in sweat produces its peculiar odor? Discover the world of science visits an English researcher who thinks the answers to these questions will help create a mechanical nose. Then, stuttering is a problem that afflicts millions of people. See promising new techniques that offer hope for even the most hopeless cases.
For the first time in many years, this is the first time I've talked to a face.
Also on Discover, caribou once roamed northern forests throughout the United States. But by 1908, its population had been destroyed in all but Alaska and parts of Canada. Watch as dedicated conservationists in Maine work to reintroduce this magnificent endangered species to the lower 48 states. And finally, meet Herbert, a high-tech garbage collector at MIT. While he may not look like much, Herbert is actually the cutting edge in research on artificial intelligence. He's one of the first robots programmed to think and act like a human being. All this and more with host Peter Graves on the 5th season of Discover, the World of Science. Then, journey to places few have